My parents told my tenants they didn't have to pay rent anymore because I'm exploiting them. Then my brother tried to move into my house claiming he's the new landlord. Hi everyone! Today's story will blow your mind, but really quick, if you enjoy this content, hit that subscribe button. Channel's been a bit quiet lately, and your support keeps it all going. Let's jump in. Original post. I, 27M, need to vent about my parents, 58M, 55F, completely unreasonable attitude toward my rental property. I purchased a duplex 2 years ago using savings from working 60-hour weeks since I was 19. The property has a main floor unit where I live and a basement apartment that I rent out. My parents have suddenly decided I'm some kind of evil slumlord exploiting innocent people. Let me provide some context. I grew up in a middle-class family where my parents always preached about helping others and living modestly. They're both teachers. Dad teaches high school history, Mom teaches elementary art. They've always been somewhat judgmental about people who make money through investments rather than honest work, but I never thought they'd turn that attitude on their own son. My older brother Michael, 29M, has always been their golden child. He followed in their footsteps, becoming a middle school English teacher. He still lives at home because teaching doesn't pay enough for him to afford his own place. Meanwhile, I chose a different path. I went to trade school, became an electrician, and worked every overtime shift available. While Michael was getting his master's degree, funded by our parents, I was crawling through attics in 100-degree heat and saving every penny. The duplex I bought needed significant work. I spent 6 months renovating it myself, new electrical throughout, updated plumbing, new flooring, fresh paint, modernized kitchen and bathroom. The basement apartment is now a beautiful 900-square-foot one-bedroom unit with its own entrance, in-unit laundry, and a small private patio. I charge $1,200 per month, which is actually below market rate for the area. Similar units go for $1,400 to $1,500. My current tenants, Robert and Patricia, are a retired couple in their 60s. They've been perfect tenants for the past year, always pay on time, keep the place immaculate, and we have a great relationship. I fixed every minor issue within 24 hours, installed grab bars in the bathroom at their request, no charge, and even helped Robert build raised garden beds in their patio area. Everything was fine until last month when my parents came over for dinner. They hadn't visited in a while because they don't like driving to this part of town. It's a perfectly safe, working-class neighborhood. Patricia happened to be outside gardening, and my mom struck up a conversation. When Patricia mentioned how much they loved living here and what a great landlord I am, you'd think my parents would be proud. Nope. The moment we got inside, the lecture began. Dad started with, "I can't believe you're charging those poor people $1,200 a month to live in a basement." When I explained it was below market rate, Mom chimed in with, "That doesn't make it right. You're profiting off someone else's need for shelter." I tried explaining that I provide a well-maintained, affordable home, that I'm responsive to all concerns, and that Robert and Patricia are happy here. Dad's response? "They're only saying that because they're afraid you'll evict them if they complain." Then came the real kicker. Mom said, "You know, if you really cared about providing housing, you'd let Michael manage this place. He understands what it's like to struggle financially. He'd make sure the rent was actually fair." I asked what she meant by actually fair, and she said Michael had told them he'd only charge enough to cover the mortgage and maintenance, maybe $600 a month. When I pointed out that wouldn't cover property taxes, insurance, and savings for major repairs, Dad accused me of being obsessed with profit. The conversation devolved from there. They brought up how I'm hoarding housing while Michael can't afford his own place, how I'm part of the problem with the housing crisis, and how disappointed they are that I've become exactly the type of person we raised you not to be. I ended up asking them to leave. As they were going, Mom said, "We've been talking to Michael about this a lot. He has some really good ideas about tenant rights and fair housing practices. Maybe you should listen to your brother for once instead of being so greedy." Since then, I've been getting texts from Michael about how I should do the right thing and either drastically lower the rent or let him take over managing the property. He sent me a whole manifesto about how landlords are parasites and how he could run this place as a community-focused housing initiative instead of a profit center. I'm just so frustrated. I worked hard for this property. I maintain it well. My tenants are happy. I'm building equity and passive income so I can eventually buy more properties and maybe retire before I'm 70. But according to my family, I'm some kind of monster. Am I crazy here? Has anyone else dealt with family members who think being a landlord automatically makes you evil? Update 1, posted 3 weeks later. I can't believe I'm back here with an update, but things have escalated beyond anything I could have imagined. Remember how my parents think I'm an evil landlord exploiting my tenants? Well, they've decided to take matters into their own hands. Last week, I was at work when I got a text from Patricia asking if everything was okay with the rental agreement. I was confused and called her immediately. She explained that my parents had shown up at her door that morning, introduced themselves, and informed her that the building was under new management and she didn't need to pay rent this month while they sorted out the transition. I was stunned. I asked Patricia to explain exactly what they said. Apparently, my mother told her that they were intervening on behalf of their son Michael, who would be taking over the property management to ensure fair treatment of tenants. My father added that I had agreed to this change, but was too embarrassed to tell the tenants directly. They gave Patricia and Robert a typed letter, on official-looking letterhead they must have created, stating that rent was suspended effective immediately and that Michael would be in touch soon to discuss new, fair rental terms that reflect community values rather than profit margins. I immediately called my parents, furious. My mother answered and acted like this was completely normal. "Honey, we're just trying to help. Michael did some research and found out that you're charging 20% above what a fair rent should be. We're protecting those poor people from your greed." When I demanded to know how they could possibly think they had the right to do this, my father got on the phone and said, "You invited us over to see the place. As family, we have a moral obligation to step in when we see wrongdoing. Michael agrees that this is the best path forward." I told them they had committed fraud and I could have them arrested. Dad laughed and said, "Go ahead. Explain to the police that your retired teacher parents tried to help an elderly couple avoid exploitation. See how that goes." I immediately drove to the property and met with Robert and Patricia. They were understandably confused and concerned. I explained that my parents had no legal authority, that I was still their landlord, and that rent was still due as normal. I apologized profusely for my parents' behavior. Robert, bless him, said they had suspected something was off. "Your mom kept talking about tenant solidarity and housing justice, and it didn't sound like something you'd say." Patricia added that they had no intention of not paying rent and had actually been planning to ask me about renewing their lease for another year. I provided them with a written letter confirming I was still the sole owner and property manager, that no changes had been made to their rental agreement, and that they should not engage with anyone claiming to represent the property besides me. I also installed a security camera system that afternoon, with their permission, in case my parents tried to return. That evening, Michael called me, and I've never heard him so pompous. "James, I heard you're refusing to honor the transition plan. That's really disappointing. Mom and Dad were just trying to facilitate what we all know needs to happen." I told him there was no transition plan and never would be. He responded, "You know, I've been doing a lot of reading about tenant rights and housing law. Did you know that in many jurisdictions, excessive rent can be challenged in court? And that tenants who have been overcharged can sometimes sue for back rent?" I pointed out that my rent was below market rate and completely legal. He said, "Legal doesn't mean ethical, James. But don't worry. When I take over, I'll make sure Robert and Patricia are treated fairly. I'm already working on a new lease that includes profit sharing and democratic decision-making about property improvements." Profit sharing? Democratic decision-making? I asked him if he was out of his mind. He launched into a lecture about reimagining the landlord-tenant relationship and how he was going to revolutionize community housing. When I told him he'd never manage my property, he said ominously, "We'll see about that. Mom and Dad understand what's right, even if you don't." I've since had my attorney send a cease and desist letter to my parents and Michael, warning them against any further contact with my tenants or false representation regarding my property. I also had to explain the situation to Robert and Patricia again, apologizing for the drama and assuring them that their tenancy was secure. The whole situation is insane. My parents, who spent their entire careers teaching children about honesty and integrity, committed fraud because they think I charge too much rent. My brother, who can't even afford his own apartment, thinks he should manage my property with some bizarre communist-style system. And I'm stuck dealing with the fallout while trying to run a legitimate business. I've gone low contact with all of them for now. My last text to the family group chat was clear: any further interference with my property or tenants will be handled by law enforcement and my attorney. This is not a debate or a discussion. Leave my business alone. The responses were predictable. Mom said I was choosing money over family. Dad said I'd regret this when I realize what I've become. Michael sent a long message about how the revolution always faces resistance from those who benefit from the current system. I just can't believe it's come to this. All because I charge fair market rent and maintain my property well. Has anyone else had family members actually try to sabotage their rental business like this? Update 2, posted 5 weeks later. I really thought the cease and desist letter would be the end of it. I was wrong. The situation has escalated to a point I never thought possible, and I'm now dealing with a full-blown crisis. 2 weeks ago, I got a call from Patricia at 7 a.m. She was upset and confused because there was a U-Haul truck in the driveway and a man she didn't recognize was trying to use a key on their entrance door. I immediately knew what was happening and told her to call 911 while I rushed over. By the time I arrived, the police were already there. Michael was standing by the U-Haul with 2 friends, holding a lease agreement and insisting he was the new property manager moving into the owner's unit upstairs, where I live. He told the officers that I had agreed to move out and let him take over the property, showing them a property management agreement, supposedly signed by me. The document was obviously forged. They had used some online lease template and badly imitated my signature. When the officers asked for proof of ownership, Michael couldn't provide any but kept insisting that our parents could vouch for the family arrangement. I showed the police my deed, my driver's license with the property address, and the cease and desist letter my attorney had sent. The officers made Michael and his friends leave, warning them about trespassing. Michael kept shouting about tenant rights and housing justice as they drove away. But here's where it gets worse. The next day, I received a letter from the city's housing department stating they had received a complaint about substandard living conditions and tenant harassment at my property. The complaint alleged that I was refusing to make necessary repairs, entering the rental unit without proper notice, threatening eviction if tenants complained, overcharging rent in violation of non-existent rent control ordinances, creating a hostile living environment. An inspector was scheduled to visit in 3 days. I immediately contacted Robert and Patricia, who were horrified. They offered to write a letter stating none of these allegations were true, which they did. They detailed how I'd always given proper notice, made repairs promptly, and had never threatened them in any way. The inspection itself was surreal. The inspector, a no-nonsense woman named Donna, was thorough but fair. Robert and Patricia were present and repeatedly told her what a good landlord I was. She found no violations, noted that the unit exceeded code requirements in several areas, and seemed annoyed that someone had wasted her time with false allegations. I thought that would be the end, but 2 days later, I woke up to find flyers posted around the neighborhood. They had my photo, taken from my Facebook, with text reading, "Warning, predatory landlord. James, last name, exploits elderly tenants at my address. Charging $1,200 per month for a basement apartment. Refuses to work with family mediators. Threatens legal action against anyone who questions his greed." At the bottom was a call to action: support fair housing. Demand justice for Robert and Patricia. Contact Michael, last name, to join the fight against housing exploitation. I was mortified. Several neighbors texted me asking what was going on. I had to explain the situation repeatedly, and while most were understanding, the damage to my reputation was real. That afternoon, I found my parents and Michael protesting outside my property with handmade signs. Mom's read, "Housing is a human right," Dad said, "End landlord greed," and Michael's proclaimed, "Fair rent now." They were trying to hand pamphlets to anyone who passed by. Patricia came outside and told them to leave. My mother actually tried to hand her a pamphlet about knowing your rights as a tenant, and said, "We're here for you, Patricia. You don't have to live in fear anymore." Patricia lost it. This sweet, mild-mannered retired librarian absolutely laid into them. Fear? The only thing I fear is you people driving away the best landlord we've ever had. My husband and I have rented for 40 years, and James is the first one who actually cares about us as people. You're not helping, you're harassing us. My father tried to explain they were fighting for fair treatment, but Robert joined his wife, threatening to call the police if they didn't leave immediately. When Michael tried to argue, Robert shut him down. "Young man, I'm a veteran. I've dealt with real injustice. This isn't it. This is a family squabble that you're turning into our problem. Leave now." They finally left, but not before Michael shouted that they were suffering from landlord Stockholm syndrome, and would thank him later when they were living in dignified, fairly priced housing. The next day, I received an email from Michael with the subject line, "Final offer." In it, he proposed that I 1. Transfer property management rights to him. 2. Reduce rent to $600 per month. 3. Give Robert and Patricia 6 months of reparations for overcharging. 4. Attend education sessions about ethical housing practices. 5. Make a public apology for exploiting vulnerable populations. In return, he would 1. Stop the public campaign. 2. Convince our parents to reconcile with me. 3. Allow me to keep ownership, but with no management rights. 4. eventually let me earn back management rights after proving I'd reformed. I forwarded everything to my attorney, who sent another, much more aggressive cease and desist letter threatening a restraining order and a defamation lawsuit. We also filed a police report for harassment and fraud, the forged lease agreement. I've also had to take additional security measures. I installed more cameras, changed all the locks, giving Robert and Patricia new keys, of course, and put up no trespassing signs. I've documented everything and started building a case for a restraining order. The stress is affecting my work and health. I've lost sleep, made mistakes on job sites, and had to explain to my boss why I keep getting calls about family emergencies. Robert and Patricia have been saints through all this, even offering to testify if I need to go to court, but I feel terrible that they're caught in the middle. The most frustrating part? I'm not some slumlord. I charge below market rent, maintain the property excellently, and have a great relationship with my tenants. But my family has created this narrative where I'm a cartoon villain twirling my mustache while evicting orphans, and they're so committed to it that they're willing to destroy our relationship and harass innocent people. I'm at my wit's end. Has anyone successfully gotten a restraining order against family members over something like this? How do you deal with the emotional toll of your own parents trying to destroy your business and reputation? Final update, posted 3 months later. I never imagined I'd be writing this final update, but I need to share how this insane situation concluded. Fair warning, this is long, but I want to document everything for anyone who might face similar family harassment over their rental business. After my last update, things were quiet for about 2 weeks. I foolishly thought the threat of legal action had finally gotten through to them. I was wrong. They were just planning their next move. 3 weeks ago, on the 1st of the month, I went to collect rent from Robert and Patricia. They prefer to pay in person. It gives us a chance to chat and for me to check if anything needs maintenance. Patricia answered the door looking distressed and said, "James, we have a problem." Michael was in their living room. He was sitting on their couch with a laptop and a stack of papers, wearing a suit that looked like he'd bought it from Goodwill that morning. When he saw me, he stood up and said, "James, good. We need to discuss the transition. I've already explained to Robert and Patricia that I'm taking over as property manager effective immediately." I told him to get out. He refused, claiming he had tenant authorization to be there. Robert immediately said, "We didn't authorize anything." He knocked and said he needed to discuss an urgent matter about the property. We thought something was wrong. Michael then pulled out his phone and started recording, announcing, "I'm documenting this interaction for evidence of landlord harassment. James, last name, is attempting to prevent tenants from meeting with their chosen advocate." I called 911. While on the phone with dispatch, Michael kept talking to his camera about aggressive landlord tactics and intimidation of elderly tenants. Patricia finally had enough and snatched his phone, deleted the video, and told him, "You're trespassing in our home. We want you to leave." When the police arrived, the same officers from the U-Haul incident, they were clearly frustrated. One officer told Michael, "Sir, we've been through this. You have no legal right to be here." Michael argued that he was invited in, but when the officer asked Robert and Patricia if they wanted him there, they both said no. As Michael was being escorted out, he yelled, "This is exactly what we expected. Using police force to maintain exploitative housing relationships. Mom and Dad were right about you, James. Here's where things got truly bizarre." The officer turned to me and said, "Your brother mentioned your parents. We had an interesting call from them yesterday. They claimed you were holding them hostage in this building and preventing them from accessing their legal property. When we explained they'd need to prove ownership, they hung up." I was speechless. My parents had tried to file a false police report claiming I was holding them hostage in a property they don't own. The officer gave me his card and suggested I file for a restraining order immediately. That evening, I got a call from my attorney. My parents and Michael had actually tried to file a lawsuit claiming elder financial abuse. They alleged that I had manipulated them into investing in the property and was now refusing to give them their share of the rental income. The lawyer they'd hired apparently did minimal due diligence because he dropped them as clients the moment my attorney sent proof that my parents had never contributed a cent to the purchase or renovation of the property. But the real climax came 1 week ago. I was at work when I got a notification from my security camera app. Someone was at the front door of my unit, not the rental unit, but my personal residence. I opened the live feed to see Michael picking the lock while my parents stood watch. I immediately called 911 and raced home. I also called my attorney and told him to meet me there. By the time I arrived, they had gotten inside. I could see through the window that they were in my living room, and Michael appeared to be changing the locks on my front door. The police arrived within minutes. This time, it was a different set of officers, including a sergeant. I showed them the security footage of Michael picking the lock, explained the ongoing harassment, and provided copies of all previous documentation. The sergeant was not amused. He ordered them out of the house and asked if I wanted to press charges for breaking and entering. My parents tried to explain that they were just trying to help and that this was a family matter, but the sergeant cut them off. Breaking into someone's home is a criminal matter, not a family matter. Then my dad made a crucial mistake. He said, "This is our son's house. We have every right to be here if we're concerned about his well-being. He's clearly having some kind of breakdown, charging those poor people downstairs so much money. We're staging an intervention." The sergeant looked at him incredulously. "Sir, are you admitting that you broke into this house to stage an intervention because you don't like how much rent your adult son charges his tenants?" My mother jumped in. "Officer, you don't understand. He's exploiting elderly people. Someone needs to stop him." The sergeant asked Robert and Patricia, who had come outside when they heard the commotion, if they felt exploited. Robert's response was perfect. "Officer, the only people harassing us are these three. We've told them repeatedly to leave us alone. We're happy here, the rent is fair, and our landlord is excellent. These people are making our lives miserable." The sergeant gave my parents and Michael a choice. I could press charges now, or they could agree to stay away from the property permanently and deal with this in civil court if they had legitimate claims. My attorney advised me to press charges to create a paper trail, which I did. All three were arrested for breaking and entering. The image of my parents, retired teachers in their late 50s, being put in handcuffs while my mother cried about housing justice, is something I'll never forget. They were released on bail that evening. My attorney immediately filed for an emergency restraining order, which was granted given the escalating behavior and the breaking and entering charge. The order covers me, my property, and extends to Robert and Patricia as residents of the property. The fallout has been significant. Several of my parents' teacher friends have reached out, having heard garbled versions of the story. Some seem to believe I'm genuinely exploiting tenants. Others are shocked my parents would go this far. My aunt, Dad's sister, called to say she's appalled by their behavior and offered to testify about my parents' pattern of extreme reactions to perceived injustices. Michael lost his teaching job. Apparently, being arrested for breaking and entering doesn't look good for someone who works with children. He's now living with our parents and posting constantly on social media about being a victim of capitalist retaliation and how he was fired for standing up for tenant rights. My parents have hired a new lawyer and are suing me for emotional distress and defamation, claiming that I've ruined their reputation in the community. My attorney says the case is laughable, especially since they were the ones who created the public spectacle. The silver lining in all this, Robert and Patricia have been incredible. They've written detailed witness statements, offered to testify in court, and even organized other neighbors to write character references for me. Last week, they brought me dinner, saying they knew I was stressed. Patricia hugged me and said, "You're the grandson we never had. Don't let them make you think you're doing anything wrong." Several other neighbors have also reached out in support. Turns out, many of them are also small landlords or property owners who are horrified by my family's actions. One elderly gentleman who owns several rentals in the area told me, "Your parents are exactly why people think landlords are villains. They've probably never had to maintain a property, deal with repairs at 2 a.m., or save for a new roof, but they think they're experts on fair housing." As for the business impact, I was worried this drama would affect my reputation, but if anything, it's had the opposite effect. A few potential tenants have reached out, saying they heard about the situation through the neighborhood grapevine and were impressed by how I handled it and how fiercely my current tenants defended me. I've had to accept that my relationship with my parents and Michael is likely over. They've crossed lines that can't be uncrossed. The fact that they were willing to commit crimes, risk their careers, and traumatize an elderly couple just because they disagree with my charging market rate rent shows how far they've strayed from rationality. My attorney is confident that the criminal charges will stick for the breaking and entering. The security footage is crystal clear, though they'll likely get probation as first offenders. The restraining order will remain in place for at least a year. Their lawsuit against me will almost certainly be dismissed. I'm in therapy now to process all of this. My therapist pointed out that this was never really about rent or tenant rights. It was about control and their inability to accept that I chose a different path than what they envisioned for me. The fact that I'm more financially successful than their golden child, Michael, probably made it worse. For anyone dealing with family who oppose your rental business, document everything. Install cameras. Don't hesitate to involve law enforcement when lines are crossed. And remember, providing clean, safe, well-maintained housing at market rate isn't exploitation. It's a legitimate business that provides a necessary service. Robert and Patricia just signed another year-long lease. They joke that they're never moving because they want to see how this family soap opera ends. I told them it already has ended, with me having the best tenants a landlord could ask for and a booming business despite my family's best efforts to destroy it. To my parents and Michael, if you're reading this, I'm done. You chose ideology over family, committed crimes in the name of justice, and harassed innocent people who just wanted to live peacefully. I hope someday you realize how insane your behavior was. Until then, stay away from me and my property. The restraining order isn't a suggestion. Thank you to everyone who offered advice and support through this ordeal. I never imagined that charging reasonable rent and being a responsible landlord would tear my family apart, but here we are. At least I know who really has my back, and it's not the people who raised me.